Hey guys, real quick, before we get into it, do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. That way you don't miss out on any of the tea. Thanks. Hi, Charles.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. So, you and I have decided that one of the ongoing topics that we would discuss on this podcast is higher education. And we've done a few episodes so far on the budget deficit at UL. We've talked about the transition of UNO going back into the LSU system. But higher ed is not the only component to the education ecosystem.
Not at all. One piece.
It's just one piece
of the puzzle.
And in our previous episodes, we've mentioned that some of the struggles that we are seeing at our higher education facilities are very much so tied to and rooted in what's happening with our K through 12 institutions.
Absolutely.
So we recently just had an article that dropped about the Leah Chase School here in New Orleans and how it is struggling financially. And we know that this is a relatively new school. It just opened in August of 2024. And what's particularly significant, right, is this is the first public school in the city that's wholly run by the Orleans Parish School Board for the first time in 20 years, which is huge. Mm-hmm. So I guess before we jump into what's going on at the Leah Chase School, can we do a quick overview of why?
Great question.
This is the first school.
Absolutely.
Because I think for a lot of people, you hear public school and you would assume that public schools are run by the parish school board, but that's not the case in New Orleans. And why is that?
Good question. So I would like to share that when we talk about this in all of our podcasts, this is actually a viewer shared expression, this topic. So we do check our messages and we really do strongly encourage y'all and value what you want us to listen.
So thank you to our Patreon subscriber, Brittany.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Who asked about this particular topic.
Yes. And it just fits seamlessly into what, we in our deciding how to continue with the podcast is just fitting in with we really think it's important to talk about education in Louisiana.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
It just is. And it is from early childhood to college and everything in between. And if one piece isn't working, it affects all the others. That's how it is. So New Orleans has been an interesting experiment. Mm-hmm. And this always, as everything does, goes back to Katrina.
Yeah.
It's just always Katrina.
All roads lead back to Katrina.
It is what it is. And so pre-Katrina, New Orleans had a traditional public school system. That is how most big, cities are, right? And it's a public school in your neighborhood that students who live within that boundary go to that school. And pre-Katrina, New Orleans had a failing public school system. It was not good. It was very low ranked, very low performance. And there had been discussions pre-storm decades long, right, of how to fix the school system. And also, interestingly, New Orleans, pre-Katrina, and still to this day, has one of the largest concentration of students enrolled in private Catholic schools. Yes. Which in the two are, we are a product of the Catholic school system. Yeah. Not just private school, but Catholic school. And there's a long history of why that's the case. So, with the rise of the Catholic school system, a lot of middle-class parents pulled their kids out, sending kids to Catholic school, and this just led to, a lot of your poorer neighborhoods in New Orleans, very poor public school system that people had tried to fix for decades. Katrina hits, and in hindsight, physically, all the public schools were destroyed, right? But this was also used as an opportunity to be well, we have no choice but to rebuild, right? And so Katrina kind of just did the work, if you will. What ended up happening, though, was New Orleans embarked on a true experiment to become the first city in America to become what eventually was an entire charter school system. Yes. So charter schools, by definition, are public schools that are privately run and operated by some type of entity, whether it's a university, a corporate, whatever it is. And they are not beholden to a traditional public school board, right, such as Orleans Parish Public School Board. And each school operates effectively independently of others. So there's not a central hub of whatever that all schools. And there's pros and cons to that, right? You're kind of doubling resources and you're kind of stretching things. And so even down to bus systems, right? We kind of don't really talk about that. So New Orleans came into our charter school, and it was seen as a panacea, like it's going to be the cure-all, and
right.
That's just because you call it charter, that's not how that works. But people kind of forget in that 2006 to 10 period, it was really believed by many people this is the solution.
Right.
And there's a lot of very negative consequences of this. So the city fired all the public school teachers. And the majority were older Black women who had been in the system for decades and were just totally mistreated, disrespected, and had to reapply for their jobs. And that was a slap in the face. So what happened was a lot of charter schools hired a lot of young kids who were moving to New Orleans after Katrina.
Right.
TFA played a big role.
Teach for America.
Right? Played a big role and recruited all these young kids who had no experience, no relationship to the community. And this was in addition to the fact that charter schools are not neighborhood schools.
Right.
So we've completely disrupted what was the prefabric of a neighborhood school. So you have kids going from New Orleans East to a school uptown, and there's just no sense of neighborhoodness, right? So this fundamentally disrupted an ecosystem.
Well, also, too, the accessibility to school, right? Like, we know that part of why that structure was created here in America, right, is that, like, we put a school in a neighborhood that makes it really easy for kids to walk to school or walk home, or if it's a little bit further for a walk, it's very easy to create efficient bus systems to get kids around. And so now you've completely dismantled, a structure that's been in place since the creation of public schooling in America.
And, a lot of people, I think people know the word charter school, but don't necessarily know what it is. There had already been a movement starting in like the early 90s for schools to become charter.
Right.
But there had never been a city to make the entire school
system charter, right?
And that's what's important here. Katrina was literally an experiment. And here we are 20 years later, and there were, in kind of the post-pandemic years, discussions of what if we kind of try again, right? And that is where the Leah Chase School came in. So the Leah Chase School opened, like as you said, in 2024, and was the first traditional public school since Katrina.
Yes.
And it was, truly like it's going to work or it's not. So we are now a year and a half into it, and
we're into the second school year.
And it's not doing well. It's actually doing pretty terribly. The enrollment has plummeted. I was reading in preparation for today, it's like, I think 20 families total in all of Orleans Parish listed as their top choice.
Right.
So now they have really hard decisions to make. Do we either continue with this second chance, or do we convert it back to a charter school? And that's kind of where we're at right now. So I'm gonna let you kind of fill in the blanks and kind of go beyond that.
Yeah, so
it's a lot going on.
One of the big challenges facing not just the Leah Chase School, but primary schools in New Orleans in general, because charters are also having the same problem, is low enrollment due to the fact that there are not young children in the city.
And why?
And why is
that the case?
And so all roads lead back to affordability, right? And
1,000%.
New Orleans is not unique in that we know nationally and even internationally that we are in the midst of a housing crisis. People cannot afford to live in cities. And so what we have seen happening in the New Orleans school system is that families that would have been living in neighborhoods and sending their kids to, whether it's one of the charter schools or whether to the Leah Chase School, is that they've now moved to communities like Kenner and Gretna and Algiers and are living on the West Bank, or, they've moved over to the North Shore, or they've moved further out in their, in St. Charles Parish and places like that. And so people have just left the city.
Because they can't afford it.
Because they can't afford it, right? And so is the answer that we go, this didn't work this school year, doesn't look like it's gonna work, it didn't work last school year, it's not working this school year, doesn't look like it's gonna work next school year, let's just abandon it. I have to say, we let charter schools, outside entities, corporations in some cases, come into our city from outside with no knowledge.
No knowledge of the culture, no knowledge of the history, none of it.
With our community, with our children, immediately after the most physically, mentally, economically devastating event to happen to the city, and spend 2 decades experimenting on our kids. Let's call it what it is.
It was an experiment.
to throw our hands up after 2 school years and go, not working, make it a charter again, I think is a cop-out. And I think that it is...
Why is it a cop-out to you? Is it because are they not necessarily understanding the root cause of why the school's not succeeding? Is that what it is to you?
I think people know why... I think people know a lot of the reasons why schools are struggling here in New Orleans. It's a lot of big problems that obviously the school board itself cannot just fix, right? School board can't make housing affordable and bring kids back, right?
Not, yeah.
And so I think it is a lot easier to divorce yourself from the problem, right? And kind of like outsource it, which is essentially what you're doing with the charters, right? Like you're outsourcing the issue and you're saying, okay, you guys go figure it out, right? And we know that some of the structures put into place within the charters of cherry picking students and things like that are how they're quote unquote fixing it, right? What ultimately needs to happen is someone has to be brave enough to finally put the children of New Orleans first and make tough decisions around how we reshape public education in this city to not just serve kids from kindergarten to 12th grade, but beyond, right? Because as we've talked about in our higher education episodes, what happens at that primary level is what feeds our higher education. When we talk about brain drain, when we talk about, building up other industries and having a workforce, not just here in New Orleans, but here in Louisiana more broadly, having a workforce that is prepared for tech jobs, that's prepared for jobs outside of just hospitality and tourism, and to a certain extent oil, even though that's not our primary industry anymore. We know that that's still quite a bit industry here, right? When we want to see a workforce that extends beyond those industries that are, is carving a new path for our state, we cannot do that if we continue to outsource fixing, reinforcing, and supporting our school system. And that's really what's happening here. I think it is a complete cop-out to say, this didn't work, maybe it should go back to charter. And I'm sure that the advocates for charter schools love to hear that, right? Because despite the fact that we can't really point at that experiment as being all that successful, for them to be able to say, well, you guys tried to send the schools back to OPSB and it didn't work. So really we're the best option. I think they would love that. They're salivating at the mouth to have that happen.
I can't disagree with that.
If we gave charter schools 2 decades to figure it out, we can give, the Orleans Parish School Board more than 2 school years to figure it out.
I agree. And well, okay, so here's my question then. A choice has to be made. Yeah. I mean, they're literally at a critical point right now. Either we, and from my understanding in the article, they kind of want to make it the school more attractive, I guess, is what I was reading, more music and art stuff, but that costs more money. Right. Right. So it's you have a dwindling enrollment. It's not even listed as a top school for people. It's not being resourced or funded properly. And so, what do you do? What would you do, honestly? Would you say, let's give it 1 more year?
I absolutely, okay. I think it deserves more than just 1 more year.
Okay, I agree.
I think it's going to be an expensive endeavor. There is no doubt about that. But right now we're giving millions of dollars to corporations that are incorporated outside of the state of Louisiana to figure it out with our kids, right? We look at how many charter schools year after year are either having their charters taken away and they're being absorbed by some other school's charter, or being closed entirely because they're not successful. So I don't think it's okay to just say, after 1 school year, let's wrap it up. I think the ideas around trying to set the school apart are actually really good ideas. And it is going to cost money. We should be investing in our kids, right? This school is named after Leah Chase. She is a culinary icon. If we had a a youth culinary studies program, right?
Ooh,
they're
good,
adding
yes.
they're adding 6th grade. I can't remember if it's
Yeah.
this school year or next school year they want to add 6th grade. So like, do our kindergartners necessarily need a culinary studies program? Not necessarily.
But our 6th graders, absolutely.
But like when you think of, you know, there is this like introductory culinary class for 6th graders as they're moving into middle school. You know, is there an opportunity to, you know, have these kids partnered with like Grodat, the farm over in City Park, and even starting in kindergarten, we are teaching about gardening and where our food comes from, and really focused on agricultural aspects of education. You know, some of the suggestions were around music and arts programs. We know that there is a hunger and an appetite for language programs, because
absolutely.
when you see what people, when they're doing the One app, what, you know, the schools that are ranking at the top consistently are the magnet schools, and in particular the magnet schools with French immersion and language immersion programs. So again, not a cheap endeavor, but like, are our children where we should be like cheapening out?
And I think another interesting question is, what is the end game here? Is the intent behind this to gradually wean away from charter schools?
Right.
Like, it certainly wasn't, we're going to do one and done. Like, I think the goal is to start transitioning back. Do you think, I don't know. Do you think that's the goal here?
I think that, I don't know if that was the goal. I think the objective probably was to dip their toe in and go.
But what was the, like, to see if they can just do it again?
And to see if that they can run a school. I mean, because it has. It's been 2 decades since the OPSB has
run
a school.
But by doing the one, then what?
So I'm not sure of how sincere the effort is to actually bring, you know, is this a like, hey, we tried it, it didn't work, so we can hand it back to the charters? Or is the intent really and truly to reestablish a traditional public school system? And there's probably a mixture of two, right?
Okay,
I think there are probably people who are actually really invested in keeping the status quo and keeping the structure as is, because they benefit from the existing charter structure. And I think there are people who understand and realize what was lost when we transitioned from that traditional public school system to what we have today, and want to bring this back, and saw this as an opportunity to lay the groundwork, or at least kind of do that initial canary in the mine for reestablishing schools run by the Orleans Parish School Board again. I think the tough part, right, is every school is charter. And if
literally every
they get over this initial challenge of the first school struggling, and we add a second school and a third school and a fourth school, that time period where you have Orleans Parish School Board run schools operating alongside charter schools is going to be a very tricky place, right? Especially because, and we keep mentioning One app, and I think we should do like a subsequent episode and really like dive much deeper into
you know,
that.
We're doing this education
in our education series, because I think that's really important
Absolutely.
Component of this. And to talk about that, I think, you know, thinking about what that environment looks like when you have OPSB schools running alongside charter schools. The idea that in public school, there is so much competition, you know, it's like Hunger Games for kids, and it's crazy, and it really shouldn't be like that.
I never thought of that way, but yeah, it is.
I really think that it's an important endeavor to reclaim our school system. You know, the tough part is the charters had it easy in the sense that like they started from a blank slate.
True.
Everything was closed. Before they reopened, they said, fire everybody and we're just going to start from scratch. And God willing, we will never have a scenario like that again, right? Like, as frustrating as the existing charter system is, and as much as you want to be like, let's blow it all up and start from scratch, We hope that it is never a situation where our hand is forced in the way that it was post-Katrina, right?
Yep, it was forced.
Because I do think that system needs to really be interrogated very seriously. And I think it is absolutely time to say what is in the best interest of the children of New Orleans and how are we best serving them, and tell the truth about the fact that like this charter system hasn't been it. Like the scores show it, you know, the number of kids going from primary education up through to higher education show it. You know, we know that this isn't working and we've got to do something different.
And I think to kind of finish off, the Leah Chase School is an attempt at figuring that out. But you can't just rely on 1 year of data. Like, I mean, you got to give it some time.
We've had one,
but also
school year.
Invest in it as you're giving it some time.
Right.
And I think you're throwing the baby without the bathwater at this point. You're like, well, that's it. Like, you can't just be resigned like that.
One school year. I think
just
it
one.
is absolutely totally disingenuous to in November of their second year in operation be like, oh, well, should we just like toss this out and, you know, just go back to
you gotta put some effort. Like, come on, you gotta.
Yeah, and I know I've said it over and over again in this episode. I will reiterate, we gave charters 2 decades to try this out. They deserve more than 2 school years.
This is on Carrollton Uptown, right?
It's like in the Fontainebleau area.
That's right, okay. Yeah. Is that an interesting intersection of neighborhoods?
Uptown,
Holly Grove, Carrollton, Fontainebleau.
And also just...
But you can come from anywhere in Orleans, right? It's a traditional public school, you can still come from...
Right, because they're still in the one app. So families from anywhere can apply. Like, you know,
so it's like a hybrid in terms of the geography of the school.
And so I think that's why it's a very interesting approach, right? Because while it's being run by the Orleans Parish School Board, again, it's not back into the full traditional, we are a neighborhood school. Because you can't rely on that, right? Like with the structure we have of like everybody has a choice of where they go. You rank your schools in the one app. To say like we're only going to be a neighborhood school would have been a death knell. Yeah, you know, like they couldn't have done that.
I'd like to see a geographic distribution of where the students are coming from.
And also too, thinking about if you have specialty programs, it's how you appeal to. Yeah, I will drive from the other side of the city.
Parents will. I mean, they've shown it
they've shown it time and time again. When you offer something special and of note at your school, people will travel for it.
Yep.
Now we get into the discussion of like, is that what schools should have to do in order to get students? But that's another episode for another day.
And that's why you have to stay tuned with us on Pelican Briefs. Great topic.
Yeah.
I hope that y'all are appreciating. I mean, again, we're getting feedback from y'all. We just covering the ecosystem of education in Louisiana. We're on all the platforms. Continue to follow us, like us, subscribe to us, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Patreon. You get the special episodes ahead of time. And we're going to keep following all this, and we really do appreciate y'all joining us. Right?
Yeah. Thank you so much, and we will see you guys next time. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Pelican Briefs.
If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
If you are loving the show, you can help us keep the conversation going by supporting us on Patreon.
Your contribution on Patreon ensures we can continue producing quality content you love.
Click the link in the description to become a patron today.
Until next time, this is Pelican Briefs.